see where we propel you to next. Thank you, Tim. Well, more now on the Reserve Bank's decision to hike interest rates for the first time in 12 years. Let's bring in the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, who joins us from Canberra. Treasurer, good morning to you. The timing is pretty rotten, right?
Well, the timing is what it is, Ali, and that's as a result of higher inflation that we've seen both globally here in Australia, but globally, but also here in Australia domestically. What the Reserve Bank made very clear is that they're normalising monetary policy as we're coming out of the worst of the pandemic. You've seen other central banks around the rest of the world take similar steps, Ali. In the United States, they've lifted the cash rate by 25 basis points, in the United Kingdom by 65 basis points, in Canada by 75 basis points, and in New Zealand by 125 basis points. So the monetary policy, the interest rates were always going to normalise, just as fiscal policy, which is what the government is responsible for, has been doing over recent months.
But come on, I mean, when it happens 3 weeks out from an election, you've got to be pretty dirty about that.
Well, they are an independent Reserve Bank, and it's not for me to criticise the board for the decisions that they take. But they've explained their decision just yesterday. But it does hopefully reinforce in people's minds why strong economic management is so important. You've got a Labor leader who can't remember the cash rate, let alone manage the consequences of it. Our focus has been to drive down unemployment. Today it's at 4%, the equal lowest in 48 years. The Reserve Bank said yesterday that that unemployment rate will even come down further. They're starting to see wages pick up, they were their words, and they know that the growth prospects for the economy are very strong. In fact, internationally, the Monetary Fund has lifted Australia's growth forecast while downgrading the rest of the world.
But look, it is incredibly hard to put a positive spin when you're going to have on your watch repeated interest rate rises is what's coming. Inflation going higher than 6% until 2024, we're being told, and huge cost of living pressures. Is it becoming difficult for you to put your hand up and say we're better at managing the economy?
Well, if you just look at the headline numbers, what they're producing is a stronger recovery here in Australia compared to the rest of the world. But let me just take you through those individual matters that you raised. Firstly, on cost of living, that's why we moved ahead of the Reserve Bank, ahead of the higher inflation numbers in the budget just a matter of weeks ago, and announced that we were halving the fuel excise that sees a family with 2 cars that fills up once a week about $30 better off. That's why 6 million pensioners, veterans, carers and others on income support have been getting $250 cheques in the mail in the last week, and that is why more than 10 million Australian workers will get an extra top-up of $420 and up to $1,500 in their pay packets when they put in their tax return from the 1st of July.
OK, so did you put too much money into the economy?
What we did is we eased the cost of living pressures that Australians are facing, and the Treasury were asked very directly whether our measures to ease cost of living that we had in the budget would have a material impact on inflation. They actually said no, and we do know that by halving the fuel excise, Ali, we'll actually see the inflation rate come down as a result of that individual measure. So we are managing the economy in very difficult circumstances, and it's a reminder to all Australians why the coalition can help manage the economy going forward too.
So is any of this your fault? Could you have done anything differently?
Well, no, our focus is absolutely on helping Australians deal with these significant economic challenges. The COVID pandemic, the war in Ukraine have both the main factors that are driving up higher inflation globally. And you heard yesterday from the Reserve Bank in their own words, the main drivers of higher inflation were global factors. So the Labor Party will seek to criticise us when interest rates go down, and they'll seek to criticise us when interest rates go up. But it's completely unreasonable to expect that emergency cash rates at just 10 basis points would stay there indefinitely. And we've got a Prime Minister and a government that is leading us through a pretty difficult economic time. We've got a Leader of the Opposition who's addicted to higher taxes, higher spending, and will put unnecessary upward pressure on interest rates. The
problem is, I mean, you've had 9 years in power and you're starting to look wobbly on what have been 2 of your strongest issues, which is the economy and national security.
Well, I would put to you that on national security, we inherited defence spending at its lowest level since 1938. We've now taken that above 2%. We've entered into the AUKUS arrangement with the United States and the United Kingdom. We're purchasing the most advanced weapons system. We're expanding the size of our defence force, and we've got 100,000 Australians employed across our supply chain. We've got a very strong record to tell there. And when it comes to the economy, we did face the biggest economic shock since the Great Depression. Ali, 1.4 million Australians lost their jobs early on in 2020 or saw their working hours reduced to zero. It's easy for you or others to forget that.
Can I ask, are you worried about losing your job? Your seat's looking a bit shaky.
It's a tight contest, but I've never taken it for granted. I'm up against a so-called independent who's a former long-standing member of the Labor Party. They don't have any detailed policies that they're putting forward, and they're not prepared to tell the community how they will vote in the event of a hung parliament. And I think this is a very real and important issue. If people vote for these so-called independents, they're more likely to get a hung parliament with all the confusion and the chaos that comes with it. And it'll be much more difficult to take those big decisions on economic and national security with a hung parliament. So people need to vote for stability and strength.
OK, it's a big day. Treasurer, thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ali.
Schools